Welcome to Our Time is a Garden, which is a series of nature workshops for women and non-binary writers of color. Workshop number 2 was facilitated by Samaneh Moafi on forensic architecture. Samaneh Moafi is a senior researcher at Forensic Architecture, Goldsmiths, University of London. She provides conceptual oversight across projects and in particular oversees the Center for Contemporary Nature, where new investigative techniques are developed for environmental violence. Samaneh earned her PhD from the Architectural Association School of Architecture with a dissertation on the contemporary history of state-initiated mass housing in Iran and the class identities and gender roles it informed. She acquired her master's degree from the University of Technology, Sydney, where she specialized in environmental urbanism in conflict zones. Before joining forensic architecture in 2015, Samaneh practiced as an architect in Australia, taught BA architecture at the University of Technology, Sydney, March Urban Design at the Bartlett School, University College, London, and led a number of short courses at the Royal College of the Arts and the Architectural Association.
But so what I thought I would share with you today is something, is a kind of a proposition around the context that we're in today. I mean, I feel like also it's something that that I've been thinking more and more about with the war in Ukraine, the fact that contemporary conflicts and human rights violations are increasingly taking place in urban areas, amongst our homes, in our neighborhoods. And it's the nature of an urban war, if we want to call them urban war. That's the kind of like proposition that I'm making. One of the things that I'm putting forward is that the parties in the conflict willfully blur the line between a civilian and a combatant. On the 6th day of the Russian war on Ukraine, we saw a TV tower being attacked, and with the kind of like with the idea that this is a strategic kind of military performance to do, but in fact the site that was attacked was Babin Yar, the Jewish mass grave. So as this is happening, as these urban wars are increasingly happening, we're also seeing a new phenomenon. I mean, the urban is saturated with media, as in every citizen is holding a camera, has a camera in his hand, is a witness, is making a video testimony, if you like, of what they are witnessing. And that's and you know, this proliferation of smartphones, it means that human rights violations in conflict have never been so thoroughly documented as we see them being documented today. So what I wanted to share with you is around these urban wars, about the way that we use these video testimonies to provide a kind of an architectural analysis that would then unpack these, because also the nature of the media is that things look out of place. It's kind of like it looks chaotic. It's hard to make sense of things that are happening. And so I wanted to share with you some of the work that we're doing with these with witnesses, with urban witnesses, and with their testimonies. And so I wanted to actually start with this footage. It's from the city of what we're looking at. It's kind of like it's taken from a grain silo building. It's a worker who's taking it. I've slowed down the video so we can see what he's filming with a bit more detail. The metadata of the video says that it's from 4th of August, 2020. But there's no mention of hour. You can see that's a kind of like the smoke is coming out of this building. And the city is Beirut. You could see it in the background of the footage. You could see the cranes on the other side of the warehouse. So this is the warehouse. This is the silo building, and the worker who's on the rooftop and is filming this. And then we can see in his footage a kind of a fire that is coming up. It's the worker is actually risking his life, right? He's so close to the warehouse. You can see how much it's burning. And nevertheless, instead of kind of like running away, he's taking out his camera and he's filming this. And then he's also kind of like sending it on WhatsApp to a friend of his. This video becomes something that is quite important to us. So this fire, the location of this fire, because the video was untimed. This fire matches with another video that we saw from kind of like much further back from the city side, if you like. We could synchronize that video with this image. This image was posted on Twitter at 5:54 p.m. And it's by a kind of like a journalist who would have probably heard the sound of an explosion, took out his smartphone, taken the picture, opened his Twitter, typed down huge explosion, #Beirut, and posted the image. So in a way, if the time of the tweet is 5:54, it would have been taken, the image actually would have been taken a minute before it. We looked at the footage kind of like very closely, and we analyzed the location of the fire in relation to the warehouse. And we positioned, it was important for us to understand, we tried to map the progression of the fire on this day. Because if we could map the progression of the fire, we could also map what it is that is burning where in the warehouse. That was the plan. So we could see that this fire is located, that the source of the smoke plume in the sense is in the northeast of the building. We then built this into our model. So this is the kind of like our 3D model of the smoke plume. And so we started repeating this kind of work with different types of images that we had gathered. This is another testimony from Bernard, a tower building that is called the Skyline. It's kind of like designed by this architect. There were people in the balcony who were filming it. This is from that balcony. So the fire is, this footage is from a little bit afterwards, because you could see the progression of the fire was a bit more. This is the kind of like the progression of the fire. You could see it being a bit more aggressive. So the fire would have accelerated at this point. This is another footage that I'm going to show you. It's from a building near the hospital. And here we have the story of a medic, if you like, who hears there's something happening. He thinks it's cool to film this. He puts his phone in the balcony in order to film this. And so we have this uninterrupted footage of the warehouse. You can see the color of the smoke is changing. And the change in the color of the smoke suggests that the material that is burning is actually changing. It's something that is kind of like very likely a tire or something of that because of the color. Now we can see something else happening now, this time on the other side of the warehouse. And we can see the sparkles in the smoke plume as well. it's as if something that has small explosives in it, like fireworks. That's what this other plume is referring to. So we're looking at, so this plume is distinctly different from the first one that we saw, which was on the other side. We then looked at this moment of the fire. And we use the shape of this fireball, if you like, in order to synchronize different kinds of footage that we had gathered. So we modeled it, and then we used it in order to understand exactly where the center of this plume is. And so therefore the center of the explosion, where would it be in relation to the warehouse? And then we use the shape of the sphere in order to match and synchronize other kinds of footage that we had gathered that were circulating on social media. For example, this footage from here was taken from a rooftop terrace. This one here was taken from someone walking on the port. This one here was taken from further back into the sea from a kind of a jet ski. This footage is in fact the one most further away, is the only one that shows the entire happening that follows. This is the explosion that is associated to ammonium nitrate, and you can see the size of this orange color plume that rises. It's because of the distance that the witness manages to capture the whole thing without kind of dropping his camera. So if we do a recap at this point, and I'll kind of come closer. This was the first plume that I showed you, which you could see from the camera of the witness, who was very close to the warehouse, who was kind of like a silo, who was a silo worker and was filming it, also this matched with the Twitter image that I showed to you. This is the dark plume that's associated to tires, and this was taken by the kind of like the medic near the hospital who was who was taking a time lapse of this. The smoke plume that is associated to fireworks because of the kind of like the sparkles in it, which was on the other side of the warehouse. And then afterwards, the sphere that's associated to the explosion of ammonium nitrate. These 4 types of smoke plume each speak of a different kind of a material that would have been inside the warehouse. So in a way, they're giving clues to what would have been inside. We did the same kind of thing from witnesses that would have been inside the warehouse, but at a different time. So for example, this image, which was leaked out from the interior, we used it. We kind of like realized that we can see the bay numbers on the top of the image. And so this was incredibly important for us in order to be able to locate the photographer in relation to the warehouse, and then use the same technique in order to model what was stored inside. We repeated this technique with other kinds of images that were taken by the same photographer. So for example, this image, which he takes, there is another actually footage that is leaked out at a different time, about a month after the images that I showed you from the interior. This is by an inspector who is coming in to examine the status of a door that's behind us, if you like. This is a door that was broken, and so the entry would have been possible through this door to the warehouse. And you can see all of these bags very closely packed to the door on one side. This is the storage room. And if we zoom out, these are the kinds of the bags of ammonium nitrate that we could have mapped. Now, because of the information that we had about the location of the explosion, we could then go ahead and, which was kind of like here at Bay 8, we could then, and this is kind of like, this is what it referred to, we could go ahead and put the remaining bags of ammonium nitrate that were allegedly positioned inside the warehouse. We did the same technique. So for example, top here, where we knew the smoke associated with the sparkles was coming from, we put the fireworks in here. And then over here, where we knew the first smoke would have come out from, we put here the tires. This was the layout that we could calculate. And this is how it compares to what standards of storage say, according to which ammonium nitrate should be stored according to UK standards and Australian standards. Our findings around this were used in the Human Rights Watch report on the anniversary of the fire, and kind of like they were used as evidence in order to bring liability to those who are in charge of the storage. All the work that we did was in fact thanks to this this moment where we were able to locate the first smoke plume that was coming out. In a way, it was thanks to this image where a witness from the city side further back had taken the minute that he had heard the sound of an explosion. And it was very much thanks to this witness who was very close to the warehouse, who's probably, but he no longer is with us because he wouldn't have had the time to run enough to kind of be safe from the explosion of ammonium nitrate. But nevertheless, he took this image and posted it on kind of on social media or to a friend in order to socialize it, right? With a kind of a hope that there might be a way to bring liability to whoever is in charge, kind of who's belligerent in the happenings here. Now, I want to kind of go from here to what happened afterwards. After the explosion, days after, people were enraged and they staged these protests, and their protests asking for liability, asking the state to hold those who were in charge liable. Their protests were gassed by tear gas. They were suppressed by tear gas. It was as if one cloud was used to enable another cloud. When the cloud of ammonium had enabled this other cloud of tear gas. Now, I want to quickly, in the time that I've left, go from here, this context where we can see this policeman who is firing tear gas on the protesters and is holding his hand as if what it is, as if questioning the rage. I want to come from this policeman to this image. This frame shows a police officer in a nice uniform holding a cordon tape. She looks away in this frame. She's looking looking away from the videographer, away and upward. In the frames that follow, sorry, let me just play this. In the frames that follow, the camera pans the surroundings. A dozen or so residents are gathered behind the police barrier. They too are looking up. The videographer herself would have been among this group. Why did she film the witnesses and not the scene they were witnessing? And why was the police officer looking away from the videographer? She too was looking upwards and away. We geolocated the video to a spot near Latimer Road tube station in London, in London's borough of Kensington and Chelsea. The timestamp of the video is 4:14 a.m., June 14th, 2017. This is the night of the fire that broke out in Kensington's 24-story Grenfell Tower. 72 residents, as many of you know, lost their lives. The majority of them brown and black bodies, migrant bodies, among them 32 from North Africa and Middle East. Okay. Notice that all of the people who are watching are also kind of like people of color. The residents who would have been in the walkways, in the Barrington Walk, for example, who would have come and gathered, and they're kind of like trying to see, just witnessing, right? Another video recorded from the same spot an hour earlier documents the fire as it wraps around the building. The only part of the tower yet to catch the flame at this point is a small wedge on this side, on the west face. I want to play this video a little bit. So he's standing, is being pushed back from kind of like where the residents, kind of like, no, it's in the same area as I was saying. He's filming the tower. This is an hour earlier from the footage that I showed you. And so at this point, the witness, instead of, you know, like he's filming the tower at this point. Sometime in the middle of this clip, the videographer notices something. And he points towards it. He then zooms in and kind of like keeps his phone zoomed in, as if trying to kind of like see through his camera what's going on, like making sure what he's saying is actually correct. What we can see is the silhouettes of two bodies trapped beneath a roof engulfed in a flame. They're looking down towards the witness on the ground. It is then an hour after this that the videographer starts filming the witnesses around them. The morning after, she shares what she witnessed with her smartphone camera on social media platforms. Circulating virally, her videos are a site where evidence and testimony collapse on one another. Eyal Weizman, my colleague and the founding director of FA, has written about the way the introduction of such images in court trials leads to complications that are aesthetic, political, and ethical. These occur not because the image provides a stable and fixed alternative to human uncertainties and anxieties, but rather because the complexities associated with the testimony, that of the subject, echo into the image object. Many of those who were trapped in the tower did not have a camera, or it didn't occur to them to film to film what they were seeing, right? Some survived, but their testimonies lack this image object evidence. What their testimonies are like, they are memories. And one of the effects of the trauma is that it often causes some understanding of a situated experience to be lost. In many cases, it is seemingly unimportant details that allow for the piecing together of witness accounts. And if those seemingly unimportant details are lost, then it's hard to kind of cross-reference witnesses' testimonies. In the absence of video testimony, developing alternative evidentiary methods are kind of a necessity. Throughout our history and over the course of a dozen projects, we have been able to develop a very specific interviewing techniques for this purpose, and we call it situated testimony. And so I want to kind of like end by a clip from this work that we did with a witness. Her name is Rashida, who was inside the tower. She didn't film what she had witnessed, but she sat with us and we helped her remember many of the details of what had happened on the night. So this is her sitting on one side. She's holding a stick, pointing to this kind of like rendering in front of her. This is our screen, which we've kind of like enlarged so that it's a bit immersive for her. My colleague Nick is sitting on her right hand side. This is Rashida's legal representative, who's sitting on her left hand side. And I'll just kind of
here. Yeah, let's say just when I find out the first, when I start smelling something, it was from my window. My window was open. Yeah, that was when I start smelling, like plastic burning. Like I was a bit of a smell, but it wasn't a strong smell. It was around 12:30. Okay. In that time. I opened the window wider, and I looked out and I saw the smoke, little smoke, lighter smoke coming from this side to this side, but very light, like the light cloudy, not light gray, like more, very light.
Okay. If you entered the smoky bits.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like this light. Like light gray, very light gray.
And so it was coming from the right?
It was coming from the right and then start to disappear, slowly.
Okay.
Yeah, very light.
Okay, so this is where I kind of like I'll close my contribution, I think. And so, like in a way, us sitting with her, it allowed her remember that moment where she was near the window and she was looking out. Remember what she was saying, remember the direction with which the smoke was coming, and then that was kind of like an important detail in the larger scale of work that we're doing around Grenfell. This is kind of like I thought I would share a snippet of it, but yeah. So in I think like the kinds of things that I feel like like maybe I'll leave it here, or maybe I don't know. There are a few things that I feel like were common across the two cases that I shared with you. It was the cloud, and it was the cloud that is kind of like that is changing a lot, and it's never static, and how to, and you know, like what it means to remember it, and what it means, what this cloud means in building and reconstructing an incident. I talked about witnesses, and I talked about witnesses with camera and witnesses without camera. I talked about urban wars, right? And I see both Ukraine, which is kind of like our present condition, the Beirut port explosion and the Grenfell fire, both all as examples of these urban wars, right? Different shapes, different speeds. But yeah, maybe I'll leave it here.